Well, first of all, I'm very happy to be here to have this opportunity to speak, of course, with our special guest, Albie Shore. Also, want to say hello, obviously, my co host, Brock Vieira. And on a more serious note, my thoughts and prayers go with the people of the island of Maui, and especially uh, those 80 individuals, their families, their friends, their loved ones who have been affected not just profoundly by losing, property or losing a business or things like that, but unfortunately lost their lives. Whatever your feelings are about climate change, whatever your feelings are about the environment, there are real repercussions to people not taking certain things seriously. And so I hope that from this point forward, we act responsibly whenever and however we can regarding how we treat this planet where we all have to live.
Yes, thank you for that, Bill. And just want to echo the same sentiments to the people of Lahaina and the people of Maui in general. Um, when it comes to talking about football, there really is no comparison when it comes to human lives.
No, sir.
Uh,
No, sir.
so at the end of the day, this is just a game, but at the same time, this game can be such a great teacher and escape for so many kids. And I also like to take a second to mention the Lahaina Luna football program, a really successful program that coaches have lost their homes, kids have lost family members, and they might have potentially lose the season. So just want to keep them in our thoughts and prayers as well.
Yes, indeed. And if there's some like deep pocket millionaire or billionaire who wants to think about some way to impact the lives of other people, maybe instead of going to Mars or whatever, you may want to sprinkle a little love on the people of Lahaina, the people of Maui, and particularly the young people who should be, looking forward to the best years of their lives as they enter, high school and college. And now many of them do not have this opportunity. So, instead of buying a platinum toilet or whatever, maybe just an idea. I want to plant that little seed. Uh, I still want to definitely talk football. I love talking football, but I felt like it would have been a waste of time and energy not to recognize there are other things going on in the world. Uh, a slightly less somber shout out to our intended scheduled guest, Donovan, who unfortunately was laid very much low by a takeout order and is suffering from a very, 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 very serious battle of his own inside his body. And I'm hoping that Donovan prevails over that chicken sandwich that laid him low. But um, on a slightly lighter note, for those who ever have had food poisoning, it is no joke. It is no fun. And shout out to Donovan, who I know somewhere is hoping he could be here, and we're hoping we'll have him on at some point when we get to something, because he's a friend of the show, and we root for him to defeat that slightly rancid chicken sandwich that tried to take my boy out.
Yeah, I spoke to him briefly. He is currently in the ER resting up, and we want to wish him our thoughts and prayers and best wishes.
Yes. Oh yes,
And
very
make
much
sure your
so.
chicken is cooked fully and maintained at a proper and safe temperature.
Proper and safe temperature. That for those of us who have ever had to sit through your Serve Safe certification, we all know, you know, above and below, never in between when it comes to temperature on your meat products, ladies and gentlemen. Now that we've had a couple of different kinds of public service announcements and you know dealt with something very serious and something a little less serious. The Big 12, I guess, is sort of a winner in all of the latest craziness in college football. They are now in some new marketplaces. They are now seen as, I guess, essentially a super conference. And all they had to do was, just sort of gather up your huddled masses yearning to breathe free as they broke away from other conferences. Most recently, obviously, it looks like Colorado had something a return ticket. I guess they just had a round trip ticket and had a layover for about 14 years in the Pac-12, but now they're back home. Uh, this is gonna be an interesting deal because the Big 12. I remember when the Big 12 was the Big Eight, and the Southwest Conference, sort of sat there next to them. And it looks like they're going to now break into divisions with Cincinnati, Houston, Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, UCF, and West Virginia projected to be in their East Division. Arizona State, Baylor, BYU, which I'm still getting used to saying that, Colorado, TCU, Texas Tech, and Utah, most likely in their West Division. And it will be interesting to see just how all that plays out, because some of these teams are traditional rivals, but traditional rivals in other places. Fascinating. And, once again, shout out to the field hockey athletes, soccer athletes, wrestlers, gymnasts, from places like West Virginia, who suddenly find themselves, doing a tournament, in Arizona that ends at, I guess about, 9:30, 10 o'clock Pacific time, getting on a plane on a Wednesday night, flying back to campus, so they could go to an 8:30 class. God love you. God love you, non-revenue producers who are going to bear the brunt of this new world in college football.
Yeah. I would like to admit that when I was a college student, I had no sports responsibilities, commitments, or things I had to do. And I still didn't go to my 8:30 classes. So shout out to all the student athletes that get hosed and still go.
Yes, exactly. I did have sort of sports responsibilities. I walked on before I was politely walked off of the football team, but I did wrestle in college, and wrestling is one of the sports where you have sometimes an all-day tournament where it's multiple team, as you know, and I mean, I think the farthest I ever went, we went one time to Shippensburg, right, which is in Pennsylvania. We went to Ohio once, and South Carolina. Yeah, South Carolina. So that's the extent, right? That's about as far west as Ohio, as far north as Pennsylvania, as far south as South Carolina, and that was a pain in the butt a little bit. I mean, you did get home, late, and of course, this is plane travel was not a thing, at least in my day, for wrestling teams in that level of college. So yeah, all our stuff was buses, and there were definitely times when you got gauze stuffed up your nose. It's you're not feeling the best sometimes anyway. Maybe your shoulder's not quite in the right proper seat part of the joint. And yeah, you get home at midnight or whatever, and yeah, you pack your shoulder in ice and wake up. And I was also an ROTC, so that made it extra fun because I'd be up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. Shout out to all the ROTC students too. So I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get ready for PT. So yeah, and somebody's going through something similar to some athlete who's doing that double dip. Maybe you have a partial scholarship for your sport, but ROTC's picking up the real is a real MVP on paying for your education. The Big 12 is going to be an interesting conference, and obviously most of the attention's still paid to the Texas schools for the most part and Oklahoma. Though, as always, Kansas State lurks, right? They have to replace Deuce Vaughn, but they'll do it. They have to replace some other good pieces, but they don't have a bunch of superstars at Kansas State anyway, right? It's not like they're Kansas State guys are 2-star recruits most of the time who they remind me of the old Virginia Tech teams in a lot of ways, right? Special teams, good defense, running game, junior college guys, 2-star recruits that you build up over time. But yeah, they lost Felix Anodiki Uzoma, who was probably their biggest star, and then obviously Deuce Vaughn. Will Howard is an interesting quarterback who is like a lot of Kansas State quarterbacks, but he has a stronger arm than most of the Kansas State quarterbacks. So he's got a good, strong arm. He's a good athlete. He's, like most of the guys, thickly built, 6'2", about 222, can run because you have to be able to run. All their guys run. But like if it's always a mistake to forget about Kansas State. TCU has got a pretty good sized rebuild ahead, and they lost a lot of good players.
Not only did TCU lose a lot of good players, just want to add, they also lost Garrett Riley.
Yes, right. That does matter. You are correct, sir. Losing Garrett Riley that's going to sting. You don't just run out and get another one of those. So it'll be interesting to see how that team looks. Now, Sonny Dykes himself knows a lot about offensive football. So I anticipate that schematically they'll be okay, but they'll probably just look a little different. But especially on defense, they're going to miss, a guy that, but and everybody's board was a top 50 prospect. Some people had him, even in their top 20, and he's going to be a good football player in the next level, I believe, as well. Other programs that I have my eye on, I think Kansas is not a mirage. I know it's sort of people want to sort of write off Kansas. They got ravaged by injury late in that season. So I feel like, assuming they don't have a repeat of that, which, you can't predict injuries or not injuries, but assuming they don't have, the hospital truck that they were sort of running the season. I mean, they were a mass unit, man. They were trotting out guys. It's like, oh, this guy was like barely on the 2 deep, or some of them weren't on the 2 deep when the season began. They were trotting out guys, and they were still managed to be competitive, which, I mean, for those that grew up watching Kansas football, being competitive, period, is something of a revelation for Kansas. I mean, they went, from 2-10 to 6-7. They bring back Jalen Daniels, who, if you're looking for like a super, super dark horse, Heisman candidate, if he stays healthy and they go from being 6-7 to, let's just say, 10-3, right? He should at least make it to New York, because he's the kind of guy that can pass for like 2,900 and rush for 1,100. I mean, he's that kind of guy. He could have that kind of season. Their defense is really the real issue. They give up 35.5 points per game. I know it's the Big 12, and that, when you sort of factor that in, it doesn't sound as bad, but still, you don't be giving up 5 touchdowns on average per game. That's not what you want. What are your thoughts on the Big 12 as we get ready to welcome our guest and dig more deeply?
It's tough because one member of the Big 12 represented the conference in the national championship game. So when I say that it's a conference full of scrubs, it's not going to be taken well. And you can even throw Texas and Oklahoma into this mix until they leave. None of these teams look like they can compete for a national championship. Now, I could be wrong again, like I was last year, considering TCU's rise. But there's no team that has a defense that I'm confident. If you look at the 2 teams that went to NYC's bowl games, Michigan lost more than TCU won, and K-State got smoked by Bama. I think that this could possibly be the year Oklahoma State gets out of their own way, but knowing them, they'll most likely lose in the championship game again. So I think it's the K-State's conference to lose again.
Oh, okay.
I know and I know that Texas Tech has a very impressive team, and we're going to talk about that with our guest.
Yes.
But I think K-State has it.
So, we are definitely going to hear some Texas Tech talk from, amongst other things, a former, elite level athlete, as well as host of the Tortillas and Takes podcast, a Texas Tech maven, expert, a person who is deeply ensconced in the red and black lifestyle, member of the 1012 podcast network, of course, a person who's intimately aware of everything in the Big 12, and obviously someone who's written for SB Nation, Fox Sports, and Black Sports Online, the People's Champion, Albie Shore.
That is the greatest introduction I think I've ever had. You know what I mean? I need you to do it for me at my pod. I need you to do it anytime I go in somewhere. That's fantastic.
I would be happy to. If you ever enter any room, any place, and you want someone to introduce you, just call your boy.
I'm gonna hit you up off top.
So we just heard my co-host, who does not represent the thoughts, feelings, or beliefs of me or Team NBS Sports as a whole, but he did in his, I'll just simply quote him, call it a conference of scrubs. In his own delightful manner, the baby-faced assassin Brock Vieira has set you up perfectly to completely tear apart his argument.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the Big 12 is never going to be the conference of scrubs. I mean, there's just for Texas Tech, which was like the fourth or fifth best team last year, beat up on Ole Miss like they stole something. Like that's, I think the thing about it is, I think the biggest problem that people have is that Big 12, and it's happened for the last few years, they don't have one great team. Like TCU is probably the best team we've seen out of the Big 12 for some years now. That's not named Oklahoma, but even then, like when they went against Georgia in the national championship game, like it was everybody, took Georgia with the points. It wasn't a question. So and this year they come in with not one true great team. There's no LSU, there's no Georgia, there's no Michigan out of the conference. But flip side of that, there's no Vanderbilt. There's no record. So.
There you go. That's what your T-shirt for the conference is say. We don't have a Vanderbilt.
That straight up, like that's the thing. Even our worst years, we had Kansas, and that was it. So we had 9 teams beating up on each other, and then now Kansas is better.
Yeah.
So like now you don't even have the free win there.
Right. I said when they hired Lance Leipold, I was like, oh, this is gonna be a different team. I told anyone who would listen. I watched what he did at Buffalo, SUNY Buffalo, U Buffalo, whatever you even call them. That was one of those programs where they used to flirt with the idea of de-emphasizing the sport of football, right? They literally thought about stepping down in terms of level of football. And then he comes in and they're an 8, 9, 10, well, not 10, but 8, 9 win and throwing a scare into Ohio State. Remember, they gave Ohio State everything they wanted. And Ohio State was like, okay, scratch them off the list of cupcakes. We're not playing those suckers anymore. So walk me through the new Big 12, which of course will have, I guess, 16 or whatever teams. And what does that mean to you in terms of what you think the conference looks like and pros and cons of this new look?
Yeah, so this will be the weirdest year in Big 12 history, right? Because we have the 2 teams leaving. We have the 4 new teams. And next year, whenever we have the 16-team conference, that'll be the going forward. It'll just be how it is. But this year is only going to be the one year where we have Texas, Oklahoma, as well as UCF, BYU, and other ones. So it's going to be a very interesting, very weird year altogether, right? Now, with that being said, everybody wants to get the last lick on Texas and Oklahoma. Even the freshman 4, like even the new teams are like, oh yeah, we got one shot at this. Right, and so it's for Tech, right? And I use Texas Tech for an example. We beat Oklahoma last year. We don't got them on the schedule this year. So as far as I'm concerned, we beat Oklahoma forever. Like that's all that matters, right? Like, though we haven't beat Oklahoma the last 8, 9 years, none of that matters. The last time we played, we won, right? And so the thing about it is this year. We played Texas, the last game of the regular season. If we beat Texas, people in the state will never be able to hear it from us. And that's every school in the Big 12 feels the same way, right? Because if you're Houston, you get 1 year against Texas, you win, you have bragging rights. Texas Longhorns fans can't come down to Houston talking to Cougar fans and say that they have a better program because, maybe. But that one time we played you, that 1 year we're in the same conference, we beat you. Right. And so like it's huge as far as this conference, and not to mention that Texas might actually be good for once. Not just like one of those media. No, it might actually be good for once.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that gets ignored is that Texas is put a lot higher because of their brand and not because of football that they actually play.
Usually, yes.
Yeah, like if we look back at Texas versus Texas Tech since 2020, Texas Tech has been the superior team, bar none. Yeah, you guys got blown out in 2021, but you guys gave them the business last year. You guys should have beat them in 2020. I don't even know how you guys lost that game. And Texas, as we all know, suck. Like I'm sorry, that's the only way to put it. And Steve Sarkisian, as I've mentioned for a long time, is not a championship level head coach. You guys actually have a championship level head coach in Jordan McGuire. Now, when you guys hired him from Baylor, he was a guy that was really high on. He's really good with the high school scene. He's really good at bringing recruits. And to me, he has a star in the mid quarterback in Tyler Show. Can you talk about your expectations for the Red Raiders in 2023?
So, Brock, I like you a lot, man. We're gonna be good friends. So, real quick, I will mention one thing you said. 99% of the time, you're right. When it comes to Texas, most times I come on here and say they're overrated. It's ridiculous. This may be the first year they actually deserve their rating, but we can talk about that a little bit later. When it comes to Texas Tech, we're in kind of foreign territory. So when I was in school, I went to school in the late 2000s, early 2010s. We had expectations, right? We had Mike Leach. We beat Texas on that Crabtree play. Even the year after that, we were known to be like a 9-win team. We beat Oklahoma that year. Right? Even as Tuberville came over, he was taking over a program that was on the upswing, right? Since then, we've been a mediocre program. It hasn't been good, right? We've gone through Tuberville and Kingsbury and Matt Wells. And so for the past decade, have not been used to seeing a program worthy of hype until last year. Last year was a weird year that I coming into the year, I didn't think the team was very good. I think I predicted us to have 4 or 5 wins. Went out and had 8 wins. Won games they had no business winning. Texas, for example. Oklahoma is another good example. And the team, a lot of the times under Kingsbury and Wells especially, would give up halfway through the season. Whenever something bad happened, it would snowball. Last year, there were games we played badly against Baylor. All 3 of our quarterbacks last year had injury problems. And yet, despite all of these problems, despite some of the injury problems we had on the O-line and some of the other things, they kept fighting back. They kept bouncing back. And the last 2 games of the season, last 3 games, I should say, because I'll include the ugly Iowa State game too. This was a different team. This was a team that I don't recognize. And so that's the reason why I think this year, as we come to the hype, we're one of the oldest teams in the country. And so we're one of the oldest teams in the country. We bring back so much, despite I know we lost Tyree Wilson, but we bring back so much on both defense and our skill players and the quarterback position with Tyler Shuck and Bear Morton both coming back, that the hype is actually justified for once. I made a mention about this the other day, but if I was to tell you that a team that won 8 games last year, that finished 3rd in their conference, won their bowl game against an SEC team, and not just won, but won pretty convincingly, was coming back, bringing virtually everybody back, including the starting and the backup quarterback, bringing back all the receivers, bringing back most of the D-line, bringing back most of the secondary, bringing back a decent amount of the O-line. And you would say that, that team is one of the top 15 teams in the country. Right? Now, I'm not saying Texas Tech is that, but I'm saying we have all the makings of that team. If that team had Michigan State on its name, you'd have no question, top 15. But I think, so that kind of tells you the type of team Texas Tech has and the type of coach Joey McGuire is.
Yeah, I'm completely on board with you. So just to give you my opinion on where I have Texas Tech entering the season, in my top 25, when it comes to the Big 12 teams, I have Texas at 14. I have Oklahoma at 16. I have you guys at 18, K-State at 19, and TCU at 23. So realistically, you guys are right in the national championship picture as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, you guys don't play Clem. You guys do play Texas, I believe, in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you guys can pull it off
to get to the Big 12 championship game?
Against Texas and Austin.
Yeah, we can. I mean, the thing about it with Texas is, though I do think they actually deserve the hype that they're getting this year for like the first time in a long time. But I think Texas Tech also deserves all hype, right? And so I think there's a good chance that when they get to Austin at the end of the year, that could be the winner of that game going to the Big 12 title game. And Texas Tech, one of the biggest things that Joe McGuire has done in the last 2 years is we've taken a team that was fairly small, and now we kind of size up, right? Like a lot of the time when we're playing Texas, we look small. When we're playing Oklahoma, we look small. Oklahoma State, we look smaller. Now we look like these teams. We have got tackles that are 6'6", 340. We have defensive ends that are 6'6", 300 and can bench a crazy amount, right? We have the same guys, the same size of guys when you're playing these type of teams. So when we go into Austin, I think if it's even, especially if we have maybe 2 8-win teams or 2 9-win teams playing each other, then it comes to coaching. And you kind of mentioned it before I came on, Brock, but if I got to think about Joey McGuire versus Steve Sarkisian, I'm gonna take Joey every time. 9 times out of 10, right? And so, like, then it becomes, and I think that's why we won last year. I think last year you switched the coaches, Texas wins the game, and so that puts us in that fighting chance. I do know it's in Austin, so that makes it a little bit different. But if I can trash talk a little bit, Austin. Anybody who's been to a Longhorn Stadium knows that is the quietest 100,000 seat stadium in the country. Like it's actually kind of amazing how you can get 60,000 people in Jones in Lubbock, or 60,000, 55,000 people in Kansas State, or even in West Virginia. And all of those 3 places are much louder than 100,000 people in Austin. Definitely the tea and crumpets crowd.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong at all. And before I go on a tangent about why the Texas Longhorns suck, I'm going to hand this over back to Bill. Do you have any questions for our guests?
Well, I want to start with recruiting. So the recruiting footprint of the conference is now going to be essentially truly a nationwide recruiting footprint, because by bringing in the Arizona schools, which will be coming in soon, you already have schools that are across the middle of the country, and now you're going to be essentially almost in the ocean or near the ocean. That means that guys are going to be recruited from American Samoa and Hawaii and everywhere that you can reach, basically. That's still considered United States territories, even, and these aren't even states, but that means that you're recruiting truly everywhere. Texas by itself obviously feeds a lot of programs even outside of the conference. In fact, everywhere. I mean, everybody recruits Texas. You have to. And now you're bringing in, you have West Virginia, though that's not exactly a powerhouse recruiting destination.
West Virginia is the Vanderbilt of the Big 12.
Oh, sheesh.
Well, I think the academics may not exactly match up. No offense, Morgantown. But they're capable of being competitive. They're going to knock somebody off. Somebody you don't think they're going to beat.
Team in Appalachia.
And shout out to Charles Huff at Marshall, who I think is one of the best up and coming young coaches in America.
Damn
but
right.
before we get more gratuitous shots, but for people who have nothing to do with even what we're talking about, because Brock loves that. But I want to spend some time talking about recruiting. Who are some of the recruits you're most excited about? How do you think all the changes we're talking about change the recruiting landscape for the Big 12?
Yeah, so when it comes to recruiting in the Big 12 now, and as we think about it going forward, I think one team that nobody's talking about when it comes to recruiting, and nobody's really talking about this year either, which is kind of surprising, they're the team that I actually think has the best chance to rise to the top of the conference. And I've heard a lot of people talk about Houston, and I think it's kind of ridiculous thinking that Houston will take over the conference, but that's neither here nor there. It's actually UCF. UCF is the team that kind of worries me. They also brought back a lot of people from last year's team. It was a pretty decent team, but a team that was on the upswing already. And they brought back a lot this year. So I think they're going to compete this year. And going forward, if we look at the 2024 rankings, they're the number one team in the conference. Right, Texas Tech was for a while, and then UCF went out and got 3 4-stars in the past month. And now they're number one in the conference, and they're really big on 4-stars right now in 2025 and going forward. 2023 also had a pretty good recruiting class. Like UCF, I don't necessarily think that it's them saying that, hey, we're in the Big 12. And therefore, come to us instead of going to Miami or Florida State or whatever. But I actually think it's them saying that, hey, because we're in the Big 12, because we're in the Power 5 conference, you no longer have to go to Georgia Tech, or not Georgia Tech, but to Louisville or to Auburn. You can now stay home in Florida and still play Power 5 football. And it's working. Right? So there's a team that really I'm really curious about as we go into the new Big 12. And that's with the Arizona schools and the West Coast schools. I think they're going to really be a force going forward. Arizona actually think that them coming into the Big 12, it's interesting. You'll see schools that weren't good in their previous conference all of a sudden turn it on when they move into the new conference. A good example was A&M. A&M was towards the end of Big 12 was not any good. They went to the SEC. Their first year in the SEC won 9 games. So you go to a tougher conference and get better. And up until recently, they've somewhat been in the national conversation as far as getting 8 wins, 9 wins, 10 wins, in a much stronger conference. I think it's going to happen with Arizona. Right? Arizona's not a good football program. It hasn't been recently. But they're on the upswing. They're coming good, and they're right in time from them moving to the new conference. As we look at a new recruiting, they're third right now in the Big 12. And I think they're the only school that has a 5-star. They're the only school that has a 5-star committed currently. Right? And then when it comes to recruiting, and I'll go back to my home school, Texas Tech, nothing changed for Tech. They are going to focus on Texas, as is TCU, as is Baylor, as is Houston. Like those 4 schools really are going to really look into Texas more than anywhere else. Because especially for TCU and Texas Tech, that's your bread and butter. Right? Texas Tech, I think, when we had Matt Wells especially, was trying to do this national look and trying to recruit nationally. And I know we recruited some out of California. We did really big on transfers. But both Sonny Dykes at TCU and Joey McGuire at Texas Tech use their connections in the state and stay home. They feel like, why do we leave Texas? Right? We just stay where we are. Dana Holgerson is in Houston. He may not even leave the metro area. He's going to try to fight as much as he can in Houston itself. There's no need in the league. And so I'm very curious to see what Arizona, Colorado now with Deion Sanders. I think one of the reasons why they've been so bad in the last decade is because they lost the Texas pipeline. So do they get back to it? Right? And Deion Sanders, living in Dallas for however long, is going to have that pipeline still strong there. So we'll see what happens there. But really, the 3 schools that kind of stand out to me when it comes to recruiting in the future is UCF, Texas Tech, and Arizona. And TCU. I should say TCU also, because they're in the DFW, so that gives them an advantage nobody else has.
I'm going to ask a question that I hadn't even planned to ask originally, but I think I'll ask it now. Do you know why it is that there was never an attempt to bring SMU into the fold during all of this recent activity?
So there's no need to. It was a couple of things. I think one, you already have TCU, so you already have a school in the Metroplex, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And so you're not really bringing anything when you add SMU. The main reason why you bring Houston is because by losing both A&M and Texas, you really want to shore up Texas, the state of Texas, as much as possible. Right, when we lost A&M, it was let's go ahead and grab TC so we can keep those 4 schools in Texas. You lose Texas, you keep 4 schools in Texas. Adding SMU doesn't really benefit the conference much. And not only that, but SMU doesn't have fans. I joke about it all the time when it comes to TCU. I joke about it when it comes to Houston. I'm serious when it comes to SMU. They do not have fans. They have fans a little bit when they're good because people in Dallas are like, oh, it's Thursday night. There's a game tonight. It's $10. Sure, why not? But they don't really have committed fans. I remember back in 2014, I believe it was. 2013, 2014. Texas Tech played SMU. That stadium, 80% Texas Tech. It was a home game for SMU. Most of the time, SMU plays TCU. In the past decade, it's been at least 50-50. But there's been some games I've seen where TCU seems to outdraw SMU. And it's not even like TCU has a huge fan base either. But the difference is that at least the city of Fort Worth supports TCU. The city of Dallas doesn't even support SMU. Really, the only people that support SMU are SMU grads, which SMU being a small private school that they are, don't have many, or people that live in uptown Dallas. So not Dallas, like a specific neighborhood, University Park in Dallas, right? So if you make $750,000 a year or more, then you might be an SMU fan. But outside of that, you're really not. And so I think that's one. So for the Big 12, it wasn't really even a question to bring them in. And I think for the Pac-12 or the ACC, I think it'd be a huge mistake to bring in SMU because you're thinking you're getting Texas, but nobody in Texas or even Dallas truly cares about that program, and so that's really the biggest thing there. And so yeah, you're not getting you're not really getting what you think you're buying when it comes to the Dallas market. You have Texas, you have Texas A&M, you have Texas Tech, you have Baylor, then you have TCU, you have Oklahoma State, and then way down in the bottom you have SMU, and that's just before you get to Stephen F. Austin and UTSA. So it's just not the same.
All right. Well.
Ow. Grouping Stephen F. Austin at UTSA was definitely something.
I'll tell you this: SFA and UTSA probably have more alumni living in Dallas than SMU does.
That's a fair point. Fair point. Damn, I don't know where to go here.
Well, it sounds like they've got some work to do at SMU. Is what it sounds like in terms of trying, because winning helps, but you said winning only helps a little bit. I guess they have to do some work in the community to try to raise their profile as a program.
Well, I mean, when Sonny Dykes was at SMU, he did a great job. He did something that SMU coaches hadn't done for decades, and I never understood why, which is go to Dallas, recruit in Dallas, go to South Dallas, go to where all the football players are, and tell them to come to SMU, and we'll give you a scholarship to SMU. And so, the new head coach, he's kind of following that same line, but at the same time, no matter how many games you win, people have to want to see you and watch you play. And it's good to say that, I'm gonna go watch 8-win SMU play 8-win Tulsa. Those, just because of the records beside it, but nobody actually goes to watch Southern Methodist University. Nobody cares about the SMU Mustangs. So when they're good, it's a question. It's just you just want to see good football. But that's the biggest hurdle they have. Now, luckily for them, they are in Dallas. So for conferences like the Pac-12 and the ACC that don't know any better, just look at the fact that they're in Dallas and say, that's what we want. And that's what you're going to try to, I just watched the Elvis movie the other day. I learned about snowing. And that's not a term that I was aware of. It's basically the snowman when you basically are tricking the person into thinking you're credible when you're not. So SMU are basically doing the snow job on Pac-12 and ACC of saying, hey, we're in Dallas and people care about us. And then if they do get accepted to one of those two conferences, both conferences will quickly find out that that's not the case. They will be like Rutgers. When Rutgers went to the Big Ten, Big Ten quickly found out people in New York do not care about Rutgers.
No, you're on the money on that. I'm going to transition it away from the SMU hate, considering we just had the director of player personnel for SMU on the show last week. You guys, recruiting-wise, had brought in a bunch of great guys from high school, especially on the defensive side of the ball. 3 guys that stand out to me are edge rusher Isaiah Crawford, safety, where was he? Because I just had him on my list. Now I lost him. Safety Jordan Sanford, and then defensive line Dylan Spencer. Do you think that this new emphasis on the defense is going to pay dividends for Texas Tech, or is it going to be same old with this defense headed forward?
Yeah, it should. It should. Last year, our defense was better. Still not great. Still not, where you would hope it to be if you're trying to contend. But not embarrassing, which is definitely an improvement over previous years. There has definitely been a focus from McGuire and staff. I won't necessarily say they're focusing on defense more or anything like that, but they're just focusing on the best, the biggest, the most talented players. And so Isaiah Crawford is a great example of that. But to Joey McGuire's credit, he's saying if you were in West Texas, we should not lose you. Right? Isaiah Crawford is probably the best example of he's a guy at a post, West Texas guy, and they looked at him early, very early, and said, we cannot let this guy leave. We cannot let this guy leave West Texas. If you're in West Texas, Texas Tech should be in your top 3. Right. There was another guy, I can't remember his name right now. He was actually from Lubbock and he ended up going to Oklahoma. But Texas Tech was in his top 3 simply because of the attention that was made to these players. And as I compare to previous coaching staffs, I got a buddy out right now who's a head high school football coach out in Levelland, West Texas. And he said that he never met the Texas Tech coaching staff once during the previous tenure. And he, and Levelland's about a 30-minute drive from Lubbock. Right. And he never met him once. And with the second McGuire was hired, he met the new staff within 2 months. Right. So that's kind of the difference there. If you're in West Texas, they're going to get you. And Isaiah Crawford's a good example of that. If you're in the DFW, you're going to know about the Texas Tech Red Raiders, and Jordan Sanford's a good example of that. And Texas Tech has both Texas Tech and Baylor, because Baylor does this too, have a very unique way in recruiting, in that position coaches aren't actually the ones that give out the offers. Joey McGuire is the one that gives out the offers. The coordinators aren't the one that give out the offers, right? They're the ones that usually reel in the commit, but they don't give out the offers. They have a whole staff in the scouting department that scouts all of these players, and they give out the offers. So a lot of the times, Texas Tech is one of the first, or one of the first, at least one of the first Power 5 programs, if not one of the first programs overall, that are giving out scholarships, that are saying, that, hey, we value you, we think you're going to be good, and you deserve a scholarship. What ends up happening is that a lot of these guys that get scholarships aren't even ranked at the time that they're getting scholarships from Texas Tech. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, they're a 4-star recruit, right? Because the scouting came in, the scouting from On3 or from, 247 or Rivals or what have you came in afterwards, and then they're starting to figure out. And then not only that, they start off maybe as a 2-star, then a 3-star, then a 4-star. Good example of this is Jake Strong. Jake Strong, a high 3-star quarterback that committed, was on the Tortillas and Takes podcast. We got a chance to talk to him. But he started out, when he signed, or when he got the offer to Texas Tech, he was a 2-star quarterback. Wasn't on anybody's radar. Got the offer to Texas Tech, went to I think he went to an A&M camp or some camp. I could be wrong there, but he went to a camp, wowed everybody there, quickly became a 3-star, quickly got 5 more offers afterwards. And by that time, he had already committed, right? And so this theme that both Texas Tech and Baylor both have of, hey, you sit out the offers, we're going to be one of the first ones there, and then that's when you're going to get a chance to talk to the position coaches, get a chance to talk to, McGuire and Kitley and all these other guys, and then we'll bring you home. That's really what's been working at both universities.
Absolutely, and it seems to have done dividend bringing in these top guys, but you guys did lose some players in the transfer portal. Obviously, Donovan Smith was kind of the big name to leave Texas Tech, which, let's be real, I don't think any of us are crying over it that much. However, when you guys talk about the incoming transfers, you guys brought in some players from kind of all across the country. Yeah, CJ Bakersfield, Quincy Ledet, Steve Linton, Jerry McCray, Rusty Stotts, who I think is going to be a major game changer for you guys in the O-line from West Kentucky, and Terrell Tillman, outside linebacker from Oregon. Out of all those guys, who do you think is going to have the most major impact the quickest?
So I gotta say, and it's not because I think he's the best out of the ones that are coming in, just I think he'll have that biggest impact is Stats, is the offensive lineman. O-line is one of the things I'm most worried about when it comes to this team. I think if this team fails to meet expectations, it'll be primarily because of the O-line. This O-line last year was an O-line that one of the biggest reasons why Donovan Smith was needed when he was last year was because he's bigger and could take the punishment. As you see, all 3 of our quarterbacks got hurt. Why? Because our O-line was very top heavy. We had last year coming into the year, I said we had 6 O-linemen total. right? Like, and don't get me wrong, I was being hyperbolic. We had 13 in total, but 6 that I felt comfortable playing whatsoever. And of the 6, when I say comfortable playing, I mean like just not good, just comfortable being on the field. And of course, you end up playing more than 6. Guys had to take breaks. Guys got injured. Guys got hurt, and so that O-line suffered. And so I think having stats will help fortify that O-line a little bit more. He's experienced. He's been in Kittley's system. Zach Kittley used to be the offensive coordinator over Western Kentucky, so he knows how to play in there. And I'm excited to see him in guard. I'm not necessarily, from what I understand, he will not start, but he just provides more depth on that Texas Tech offensive line. And so that's why I think he's going to be very important to really, and I'm hoping, I'm praying, that he really shows out. Another guy that I'm just excited for in general is AJ McCarty. AJ McCarty comes from Baylor, was a corner from Baylor. And he is a full transfer. And one of the reasons I'm excited for him, he actually had a pick 6 against Tech last year in Lubbock. So you go from hating the guy because that's a bit, and that was probably the worst game of the season for Tech, but you end up hating the guy just from that game. And then now a year later, you're like, I just want more of it. I want to see more of it from AJ McCarty. And I think, again, he may not start, but he's going to get a lot of playing time for the Red Raiders this year in that secondary that was improved last year. And I expect to improve even more this year.
Absolutely. So last question I have for you before I swing it back to Bill is looking at the Big 12 media poll. You guys are ranked 4th with 4 first-place votes. Texas was ranked number 1 with 41 first place. That's ridiculous. Okay, that I didn't realize they had that much. That is stupid.
It's Texas. It's Texas.
It's dumb. It's dumb. It's dumb.
It's
Kansas State defending champs 2nd, and the Oklahoma at 3 with number 5. You guys are drawing up a lot of attention. What needs to, obviously besides victories, but what do we need to see on the field in order for Texas Tech to finally become a Big 12 champion?
Tyler Shuck needs to be the guy that was advertised 2 years ago. That's the biggest difference between Texas Tech being, an above average to above average, like maybe 6-7 win team, and them legitimately competing for a conference title. Tyler Shuck needs to be that transfer from Oregon that was considered a potential first-round pick just 2 years ago. Like, that's what, if he becomes that, and Tyler Shuck, since he's been here, this is his 3rd year at Texas Tech. The first 2 years has been injury plagued. He played, in the 2021 season, came in, had a few. That first game against Houston was great. It was dynamite. He showed out. And then against Texas, Texas beat us up pretty good. And he got smacked around a little bit. He got hurt in that game, out for the season. Last year, it took one drive. He was out for the next 2 months, right? And then when he did come back, he looked like a shell of himself up until the Oklahoma game. The Oklahoma game, finally, you started seeing, okay, Tyler Shuck might be back. And then Ole Miss, he played fantastic. And so if that Ole Miss game really gives Tech fans hope of this may be who we were hoping for. And I think if Tyler Shuck can stay healthy and play that way, not only do I think Texas Tech has a good chance of legitimately competing for the conference title, but also he can get drafted. I mean, it's not like he just fell off on people's radars. For one, every quarterback coming out is going to be 35 years old. So that helps. But he's going to have that opportunity. It may not be first round anymore, but he's going to have that opportunity in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round if he can show out like he did against Ole Miss and just be consistent and stay healthy. Luckily, usually I'm a little worried as far as our backup. Baron Morton also, I will say this, he's the backup quarterback this year coming in. He showed he was a dog. Last year against Oklahoma State, he ended up hurting his ankle because our O-line wasn't any good. He ended up hurting his ankle in, I think, the 3rd quarter. Up until that point, he was killing the OK State defense. Absolutely killing the OK State defense. And he, Texas Tech, a big question is what would have happened had he not got hurt. And especially for that game at least, but maybe going forward, had he not got hurt against Oklahoma State, what happens? And we'll never know. Oklahoma State ended up coming back in that game, and it that's a lot of other things. But Baron Morton, I think, and I made this statement on the podcast, that I think he is the best backup quarterback in the Big 12. And so if something was to happen to Tyler Shuck, that sucks, but we do have a backup that can come in and fill the role. So Texas Tech's actually really well positioned in the conference. I will say one thing, because I know Brock, you're very disgusted with Texas's ranking, and I'm used to it. I expect it. One thing you said earlier in the pod, that K-State, that's kind of your pick there, and I don't know if I'm jumping ahead of myself. I definitely think K-State should at the very least be favored and number 1 in the rankings. But I think the team that's actually the most overrated so far, or hasn't shown us, or hasn't given us any reason to think that they're going to be the 3rd best team in the conference, as I buried the lead a little bit, it's Oklahoma.
Thank goodness.
Nothing about Oklahoma, the team that won 6 wins last year, won 6 games last year, and how Brent Venables coached last year. Nothing from that team tells me that this should be a 9-10 win team this year like that. Right, like there's nothing that they've done, and so also I don't believe in Dylan Gabriel whatsoever, and so I think that's to me I don't really get it. I think right now we're saying that Oklahoma's Oklahoma, so therefore they're going to win 10 games. Last year was just a blip on the schedule, and they'll be right back at it. And nothing that we've seen proves that should be the case. Like we don't really know. Like as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to Brent Venables as a head coach, we have 1 year sample size, and that's it. We've never seen him coach before as a head coach. So that's the team I think is the most overrated. I think, Texas in my Big 12 ranking, I have them 2nd. So it's, not too far off. But Oklahoma, I think I have them 6th. I don't believe in them.
Yeah, before I hand this back over to Bill, I gotta completely agree with you on Oklahoma. I have them ranked as 16th because they did bring in a bunch of really good players this year in high school recruiting and transfer portal. But from a coaching standpoint, there's some major question marks to be asked of them, especially if you look at that Texas Tech tape. Texas Tech did 2 things. If they were getting pressed at Atlanta scrimmage, they were beating Texas Tech was beating Oklahoma deep. If Oklahoma was playing off, they would run a quick bubble screen or wide receiver screen, and it worked. It literally worked flawlessly, and that shouldn't occur. I do have Oklahoma, like I mentioned, at 16th because of their recruiting, but major questions at quarterback. I hate to say anything bad about Hawaii boys, but Dylan Gabriel, clearly there's levels to it. Is not at the Big 12 level. And most importantly, it's really tough to say that Oklahoma is not going to be good because you will get attacked mercilessly on Twitter by OU fans about it. Like they be in their feels about Sooners all the time. It is what it is. I do want to add that I think one of the most overrated teams is actually UCF. I don't understand the hype behind it. I don't think Gus Malzahn's that great of a coach. I think he got notoriously lucky the 1 year he went to. Let's not forget, he needed 2 literal miracles to go to the national championship his first year at Auburn, which was the prayer Jordan Hare, followed up by the kick 6. So, nothing about him, John Reese Plumlee. This program has me excited for it. I think BYU is a little bit underrated. I think Slovis is going to be a lot better than we think. I think BYU has made quarterbacks look a lot better than they probably are in terms of Zach Wilson and Jared Hall. So I think that we could see that with.
But I think one thing about BYU also is that nobody ever knows how good or bad BYU is going to be. They're always a wild card because you can't take recruiting. That it means nothing when it comes to BYU. You can't take who's coming in. That means nothing when it comes to BYU. So every year you look at BYU and you say, well, they could be 4-8, or they could be 8-4, or they could be 10. Nobody really knows. We like to make assumptions. We like to think about it. I think I have BYU 10th. But if they come out and have a 9-win season, it won't shock me at all.
So if I remember correctly, BYU in the modern recruiting era has never had a 5-star and has only had a handful of 4-stars, right? Ever in the history of the program. They're another, as you said, it's a mystery, partially because they park guys in Venezuela and Chicago and wherever for a couple of years, and some of them never come back, right? Some of them, they discovered that there's more to life while they were in Warsaw or wherever it was, and they never come back and play again. And some of them come back and they're better than ever before, and some of them come back and they're not as good. But when a guy takes 2 years out of what should be the most important years of his football development and does something else with his life, it's a fascinating way to build a program.
Well, not only that, they're also more experienced, they're more mature. So it depends. I guess it reminds me a lot of the 2000s with Mike Leach. Leach's system and the air raid at the time was so unique and revolutionary that ratings didn't matter. Like Leach was never a good recruiter. He recruited what he thought fit his system. So Wes Welker wasn't getting scholarships from anybody because he was 5'2" or whatever, a little scat back out there. Got a scholarship at Texas Tech, and he turns out to be one of the greatest, kick returners and slot receivers in college football history randomly. And so these guys, and so it's very similar to BYU, where you can't just a guy that's a 2-star can end up being. I think Zach Wilson was a 2-star. And he ended up being one of the better recruits for our prospects of that year, even though
Played like a one-star.
I thought he sucked. I thought he sucked as a prospect, but that's
He
neither here
did
nor
suck
there.
as a prospect.
But still going, for BYU, still they took a 1-star quarterback and made him a star, right? They and then the quarterback that followed up, Hill, took a 2-star quarterback, made him a star. They can make these guys stars, or to Bill's point, these guys that could potentially be stars, they go out somewhere, they find more to life, or something happens, they get older, and they're just not as good as we thought they'd be. But you can't, there's such a wild card, you can never know. I will say when it comes to the freshman 4, BYU is more battle tested than UCF, Cincinnati, or Houston is. They've been playing a Power 5 schedule, even if they haven't been recognized as a Power 5 team.
So, real quick, before I hand it back to Bill, I'm going to make, I think, 5 controversial statements about BYU football.
Uh-oh.
And before I do, I want to make this very clear to everyone that's watching. These statements are my own. These statements do not reflect Team NBS Media, Bill Carroll, or Albie Shore at all. BYU is so effective because majority of their players have like 5 kids, a house, a mortgage, and like 3 car payments. BYU is successful because they bring in 18-year-old Polynesians that are physically 23. Zach Wilson, if he had a half of an ounce more of melanin in his skin, wouldn't have been a second-round pick, let alone second overall. If you want to look up a textbook definition of white privilege, look up Zach Wilson. Now, I watched Zach Wilson play live in the 2019 Hawaii Bowl against a Hawaii defense that had some dudes, but wasn't that good, and they whooped him. Literally spun him like a helicopter's propeller in the end zone before he threw the game-losing interception. BYU is the most overrated program in the past 10 years because of their independent schedule and their ability to schedule top teams when it's their worst season in a century. USC, may that be an example. The good thing for them is that they're playing in a conference that is also sucking across the board as we currently speak. Oklahoma State lost a bunch of guys in the transfer portal. Iowa State, what happened to them? They were on the verge of greatness after the 2020 Fiesta Bowl, or 2021 Fiesta Bowl, whatever you want to call it, but 2020 season. Houston, what the hell was that? You had Clinton, Tank Dell. You just went 12-2, whatever. West Virginia, need I say more? Cincinnati does have Emory Jones, but they also have a scrub at head coach and Scott Satterfield. This might actually work well with BYU because it's the same format as their independent schedule, which are scheduled teams that aren't that hard to beat. And yeah, so that's all I have to say. Bill, I'm gonna throw it back to you. I'll be able to throw it back to you guys. That's all I got to say.
Real quick, I will say before it goes back to Bill, one thing I do agree with you on that I thought was hilarious is the Zach Wilson melanin thing, because there's really no difference between Zach Wilson's last year and Jaron Hall's last year. Actually, you could argue Jaron Hall's was, might have been better. And Jaron Hall wasn't even looked at for the first 2 rounds. It wasn't even thought of. So you might have something to that.
Jaron Hall made the mistake.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, sorry, Bill. What were you saying?
I was saying Jaron Hall made the mistake of being beige. I guess is what we're
Yo, you're right. And may I just add, what in the tape between Zach Wilson and Justin Fields made anyone think that Wilson was a better quarterback? When we were doing our prep evaluation, Bill Carroll, Jeff Barnes, the whole group, I kept on saying Zach Wilson is only better than Justin Fields in his deep ball throwing ability. He throws the best deep ball, one of the best deep balls in the NFL. That's it. If Justin Fields was Justin Fields from Spokane, Washington, who grew up whose dad was a Microsoft executive, and his cousin was Brock Hurd, or whatever the Washington quarterback was at the time, like he would have literally been the number 1 quarterback off the board, possibly going over Lawrence. That's how the color blinders have shielded people from truly evaluating prospects. Zach Wilson's best games came against like South Florida. Zach Wilson's I'm not even gonna look at the schedule. His worst game was against Coastal Carolina. Yes, he didn't have that long to prepare, but Coastal Carolina wasn't a great team in the
If you're the number
world
2
of
pick in
college
the
football.
draft, you shouldn't be a problem.
They were the best Group of 5 team, but the Group of 5 team was a mid-level Power 5 team at times. It depends on the season. BYU now, I think, has found themselves a new version of Zach Wilson and Keaton Slovis, and I bet you Slovis is going to go 9-4. They're going to win a bowl game by like 4 points in a game that they were favored by 12. He's going to have an incredible pro day, and he's going to shoot up draft boards. He's going to go 28th overall to like, I don't know, the Niners, maybe. Who knows? And everyone's going to hype him up, and you're going to put him in the game, and he's going to throw 5 interceptions. That is the BYU method. They've done it their entire lives. The only 2 guys is Jim McMahon and Steve Young. And sometimes McMahon made some plays where you're like, yeah, that's a BYU quarterback. And they're just going to keep doing this until the dawn of time. And they're going to hold on to that one national championship they don't deserve. And they're going to keep saying that Lavelle Edwards is the greatest coach of all time. And it's ridiculous. Wow. I did not expect to go on an anti-BYU rant today, but just had to get that off my chest. I'm a pause from now. I'm gonna take it back to the true football savants. What do you guys have to say?
Yeah, that was quite, yes. Well, once again, thank you for disavowing, again, that these do not represent anybody's thoughts and beliefs but your own, because you are very much alone in this.
I'm not wrong.
No, I didn't say you were wrong. I said you were alone. Those are 2 different things. But I want to get back to asking questions of our guest who's given so generously of his time. There's 2 particular transfers that I thought were interesting, particularly obviously with what you've lost in the draft that just took place. You have Steve Linton coming from Syracuse and Miles Cole coming from Louisiana Monroe. What is your expectation for those 2, and what do you think that they'll be like in your system?
Yeah, so I think that that was a good question. A question actually I wasn't prepared for. So I will say that I believe hold on a second. All right, there we go. Lede from you said from Monroe. Lede from Monroe. I actually think Lede is the one that's very interesting to me because especially with Tyree Wilson leaving and the D line kind of being not, I wouldn't say a question mark because we do have the law firm that I like to call them, our 2 starting D tackles there in the middle. And that's where Lede is really going to be used more. It's kind of that either we're going to do a lot of mixed defenses. So we're going to have this 3-4 setup and the 4-3 setup. And I think Lede is somebody that you can easily see playing either that 3-4 end or working sometimes on the inside as well, coming from Louisiana Monroe. He is a bit undersized, but the guy is fast. And he's a West Texas boy from Orange, Texas. So he's one that I don't think, again, is not going to start, but I am interested to see what he does on the coming off as a depth piece, especially when he's coming in for guys like Tony Bradley, for guys like Jalen Hutchins, and what he can do as far as making sure that they're in at all times. And so, like, same thing with Steve Linton, right? So Steve Linton, talk about speed. I mean, that is his thing, right? And I think Steve Linton is actually a guy that we may see. I know right now some people aren't sure whether he started or whether Joe Adedire, who was a second-year guy out of the Mansfield, is going to start there. I actually think Linton is the guy that we want to really fill in that space and kind of fire off the edge in that wide 9, and just go and attack the quarterback right there, right? He's really, I've been hearing some great things out of fall camp as far as some of the things that he's able to do and some of the quickness that he possesses, right? He doesn't have the same strength as Tyree Wilson. I mean, nobody does, but that speed, I actually had somebody tell me, one of the guys from Red Red Sports tell me that speed that Linton possesses is similar to Wilson. And in fact, that he can fire off the edge there will definitely be something that'll be to watch out for. I expect him to start instead of Joe Adedire. I think Joe Adedire still needs a little bit more growing up to do. I mean, he's only going to be 19 this year. So it'll be fine to let the guy who's like like Brock likes to say, has a mortgage and 5 kids, come in here and turn up a little bit. But yeah, I think Linton actually, if anything, is most likely to lead the team in sacks. Either him or Josiah Pierre will lead the team in sacks. So I'm very excited to see what he'll do coming out of Syracuse.
Okay. And then a couple other new-ish faces that I think may contribute, but you can tell me what you think of them. I'm interested to see what happens with CJ Baskerville, who is going to play that hybrid position that, some teams call it the angel, some teams call it a rover, some people call it a monster, some people call it a star, whatever you want to call it. I've heard good things about him, and I don't know what you've heard. And then 2 other guys that I'm interested in what your take on are Rashad Williams and Malik Dunlap.
Yeah, so CJ Baskerville from San Diego State, whenever we signed, a lot of people were very excited for him. Very excited for what he could do, and he hasn't disappointed so far. That star position that we have there, and it was made popular by Jalen Petre at Baylor a few years ago when McGuire was over at Baylor. That was the idea behind the position. It's Jalen Petre. And so it'll be interesting to see if Baskerville can fill that role and fill that time. I've heard nothing but great things about him, so I expect good things from him. But, you never know. We'll see what happens. I think that linebacker group and that star position is kind of a hybrid between weak side linebacker and strong safety. But that whole linebacker group worries me, right? We don't have Colin Schooler, or we don't have that Mike big linebacker like we've had the past few years. Jacob Rodriguez used to play quarterback at Virginia. And Josiah Pierre, who's kind of had sparing. He started playing a lot more at the end of last year, but has only played sparingly. And then you have Baskerville right beside him in that star position. So I'm really squeamish on that linebacker position overall. When it comes to the secondary, it's not usual that you see the secondary at Texas Tech as a strength. But it really is. Malik Dunlap and Rashad Williams is a big reason for it. I think Rashad Williams is actually going to be drafted next year. I really do. At the end of last year, he started turning into, I won't necessarily call it a lockdown, but teams started to say, where else can we look? Right, and what ended up happening was that Malik Dunlap got a lot of it because we had corners that the teams were like, we don't want to really go to their section. Malik Dunlap ended up getting a lot of throws his way. And sometimes he got mossed. There was a couple times where it was like, you don't want to see that tape on Monday. But there was other times where he had to step up to the plate. And I think that was the difference between Malik Dunlap and some of the corners we've had yesteryear, where some other corners would just get mossed every other play. Like they just, and they started hanging their heads. Malik Dunlap might get mossed one play, but he's going to break it up for the next one. He had some game-saving pass breakups. It happened in the Houston game, happened in the Oklahoma game, where he made the play that was necessary, and that was huge for the team there. And so Dunlap, Rashad Williams, I know you didn't bring him up, but the Rabbit is a fan favorite, and that's the Adrian Taylor Demerson over at free safety. And he's done a really great job as far as being a ball hawk. And I think he's going to be somebody that hopefully, if Tech has a great year, is going to be one of the conference leaders in interceptions, because that's just kind of how his brand is. I think the thing about the secondary that the only pause I put on the secondary is within. Right, we have Rashad Williams, we have Adrian Taylor Demerson, Malik Dunlap, Tyler Owens, who's a Texas transfer from last year, Marion Horn, who was a high 4-star recruit from last year as well. From 2 years ago. Sorry, we have some good players here, but it's very thin. We don't have a lot of depth overall from the secondary. Now, the good news there is that last year I said the same thing about the D-line. The D-line was very top-heavy, and we didn't have a lot of depth there, and it still worked out. The D-line still played really well. So I'm hoping you see the same thing on the secondary side. But now the secondary that had depth last year, now it's the exact opposite problem, where it's very top-heavy, but not as much depth.
Last position group I want to ask, we talked a little about the quarterbacks, and I remember, when Alan Bowman was there, I was very excited to see what he became. And, of course, what he became was injured. And then eventually ended up transferring. And as you said, now it's another sort of exciting but injured player you're sort of waiting for. Take me through your running backs, wide receivers, and who do you expect who maybe hasn't done it yet, but you think will do it? And then last but not least, I guess we'll talk about tight ends, which – at one point wasn't even a thing at Texas Tech, but now it's a thing at Texas Tech.
Yeah, well, and so people that like tight ends should give Matt Wells credit. It's the only credit he'll ever get from me. But he brought the tight end back to Texas Tech, and Jordan McGuire was like, "Hey, thank you, appreciate that." Mason Tharp is here because of Matt Wells. Mason Tharp is 6'9", just he could, he may end up playing in the NBA afterwards. I don't know how good of a hooper he is. He's just tall. That's all I know. But he's not only is he tall though, he does catch the ball at his highest point. Is a really good receiving tight end. I think the biggest thing that he has had to work on is the blocking portion of it, like all thin 6'9" tight ends in the country. We also have Baylor Cupp, who is a Texas A&M transfer, not a Baylor transfer, Texas A&M transfer from a few years back at the tight end position, as well as Henry Teeter, who is also a transfer coming in. So we have actually, for the first time ever, have depth at the tight end position, right? We have used tight ends before. Shout out to Jason Morrow back a decade ago. But it's always been one guy, maybe two guys at most. Last year we had two guys, right? This year we have three, actually, and Jaden York, who we'll almost never see. But even Jaden York is a guy that can step on the field and do something for us. We actually legitimately have depth at the position, and that tight end group is going to be used. Cupp, which is known as more of a blocking tight end, has gotten a lot better at catching the ball, as has Teeter. Mason Tharp's gotten better at blocking, like I said before. So the tight end position is actually going to be something we'll see. And that doesn't take away from the receivers, right? So our receivers this year is at Texas Tech. Even last year was a quote-unquote down year for receivers. Doesn't matter. Our receivers are always going to be good, right? If there's one position group I never worry about, even if I haven't seen some of the players play, receivers are going to be good. We've always gotten 4 stars, no matter who the quarterback is. We always get a 4-star receiver. Our receivers are always coached up really well. And so once again, another year where one position I do not worry about is receiver. And a big reason for that is Duran Bradley is one of the best receivers in the conference. So we have, again, a star receiver. Last time we had a star receiver was Eric Ezukanma, who just showed out for the Dolphins in their preseason game last week, or this week, I should say, a couple days ago. And he's next in line, right? Go from Kiki Kuti, Eric Ezukanma, now Dream Grant. And he's just next in line, and Duran Bradley. I think he made the preseason All Big 12 team, and he's going to show up, and he's going to show out this year, and he's going to be eligible for the draft, and we'll see what happens there. But he's going to be good. Loic Fungi, every year for the past, this will be the 3rd year now, I've said, watch out for Loic Fungi. Last 2 years ago, disappointed, didn't do anything. Last year, started seeing it. As the year went on, we started seeing his capabilities and his potential, especially when Baron Morton was in the game, because you could see as both of them being on the second team, they built rapport there. Now Loic Fungi is the guy. He's the starter. Nobody's ahead of you. You're going to get majority of the snaps to see what you can do, and I expect him to show out. He's a former 4-star player that has been giving a lot and put a lot on him, and he's something that's rare in college football nowadays, a true senior. Right? He's a 4-year senior. We don't see that much nowadays. Now we see 6-year seniors and 7-year seniors. He's a guy that graduated in 2019 in high school, and now it's 2023. Actually, no, sorry, graduated 2020 in high school, and now it's 2023, and he's a senior and hasn't redshirted. And so that's another guy there. Nehemiah Martinez actually is interesting. When he came over, I expected to never actually say his name whatsoever. I didn't think he'd actually be anybody I'd really have to worry about. Last year, had a game, went off. And then every other game went off, and kept out of – and he's a small, tiny little package guy. You don't expect defenses in the backfield say, oh, well, we're playing 11 on 10 because they got a midget on the field. And then he bursts out for a 30-yard reception, right? Plays that H-back position, sometimes lines up in the backfield, and is that hybrid there. And then we have Miles Price, who's really the leader of the offense, was the leader last year. I ain't gonna lie to y'all. Last year, I thought he was a senior. I was wrong. He came back for another year. So that receiving core is one I never have to worry about. And I'm talking about the starters, but there's still depth. JJ Sparkman started showing out last year as well. Coy Eakin is a guy that his name from that first recruiting class a couple years ago has been in the ethos, if you will, and hearing nothing but great things about what he can do, right? Xavier White has been in this program what seems like forever, playing every position you can play on offense. And Brady Boyd was a guy that transferred over last year. Everyone thought was going to be a star out of Minnesota, and barely played. And I think he's going to barely play this year just because of how much we have on the offensive at skill position. And then to kind of talk about the last group there at running backs, we did lose a big piece. So Roderick Thompson has been a guy who has gotten minutes, he's gotten snaps at the running back position for the last 4 years. So losing to Roderick Thompson is nothing to be snuffed at. That is a loss, right? But Taj Brooks, I think, has been our best running back the last 2 years. Sorry, Sir Roderick. My bad. This is my opinion. I think Taj Brooks has everything you want from a running back. He is quick, he is shifty, and he's great in between the tackles. Cameron Valdez, the backup running back, has speed. We saw it at the end of a couple games last year. And we finally, the first of all, Cameron Valdez has some of the best tape I've ever seen from a running back coming to Texas Tech. And so the finally getting a chance to see that was great. I can't remember which game it was, but at the end of the game, it was a blowout, busted off a 40-yard run like nothing. And he's going to get a lot of that, a lot more playing time this year. And then we saw Bryson Donnell, also really highly rated running back when he came out of high school. He was able to use up some of those games that the NCAA gives you now while still redshirting, so he's still a freshman. And he's another one that looked pretty interesting as far as what he's going to do. But I expect to see mostly Brooks and Valdez. I mean, when it comes to the skill position guys, I'm not worried. Running back, wide receiver, tight ends, we're good across the board there. The only thing offensively that worries me is Shuck's health and the O-line in general. And from there, we'll see what happens. So one thing I do want to say, because I do want to say something about Brock, what he said earlier about the Big 12. And because I heard it before I came on, he's talking about Oklahoma State. And I did just want to say, when it comes to Oklahoma State, Alan Bowman is their quarterback. And not only is Alan Bowman their quarterback, I saw what Oklahoma State looked like with a mediocre quarterback last year. Therefore, I have no faith in Oklahoma State whatsoever. I just, not at all. I mean, Alan Bowman has proven that you leave one university, they didn't really want you. You go to a university, bigger university, you think you'd be big time. You become the third string quarterback. Now you're at Oklahoma State, and really in a situation where they ain't got nobody else. It's either you or Kel Gundy. Not a lot of faith there. So I just want to throw that out there.
So, well,
Go ahead.
Real quick. I just want to say that they brought in two impressive transfers from Washington State and Wyoming. I think Sean Tyler and Deshaun Stribling. And Mike Gundy has this very odd way of making quarterbacks seem a lot better than they actually are. Taylor Cornelius, I think, is kind of like example number one. That was his first name, right? I remember his last name was Cornelius. Whatever.
Yeah,
the dude was not good. So just want to say that. So I want to go over the schedule with you for 2023, Albie. I want to see what I want to get, win or loss. I'm going to say the team. I'm going to give my prediction, and then I want to get yours. Does it sound good with you?
Okay. That sounds great.
Opening the season at Wyoming, clear win for the Raiders. Red Raiders. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, that should be a dub.
Yeah. You guys play Oregon at home. I think you guys win.
So this game is a make or break, in my opinion. This will tell us everything we need to know about how good or bad this team. Well, maybe not how bad, but how good this team is, right? I'm going to go ahead and say it's a dub. Because if you haven't noticed, anyone listening to this an hour and almost 20 minutes in, I'm biased. So I'm going to go ahead and say that's a win. But I do think that's a game that definitely I'm very curious to see what happens in there. Because I think Oregon's going to be good this year.
I concur. I'm going to skip Tarleton State because I think we all know the answer for that one. You guys play at West Virginia. You know how I feel about the Mountaineers. I think you guys win that game. What do you think?
Yeah, that's it, man. You know what's funny? I thought the Neil Brown hire was such a good hire. I was on the Neil Brown train. Thought it was such a good hire. I was waiting. You can ask Jeremy, my co-host on Tortillas and Take. I was waiting like, this is the year Neil Brown gets it done. This is the year. That team stinks. No, we're gonna win on the road.
Yeah, there's not really much you can say, but they missed Dana Holgerson. Talking about him, you guys play him in your 5th game of the season. You guys play Houston at home. I got you guys beating the Cougars. What do you think?
Houston will happily give Dana Holgerson back. The fact they haven't fired Dana Holgerson, I think, is pretty amazing to me. And it's something that if you're Major Applewhite, you have to be pissed that he can get away with the mediocrity that you weren't able to get away with. Actually, Major Applewhite has been a better coach at Houston than Dana Holgerson has been. But anyways, I digress. Yeah, Tech's going to win. They're going to win by Tech has won every time. We've lost to Houston one time in the past 20 years. When we play Houston, we win. So
yeah. There's nothing more that needs to be said. Only 2 things. Holgerson's living off of that 12-2 season, and also he was favored to win by 14 against Hawaii in the 2020 New Mexico Bowl, and then he lost by 14 to Hawaii in the New Mexico Bowl, which, by the way, was played in Frisco, Texas, just to
Well, I will say this.
add
I
that.
will say one thing about Houston real quick, though, is that a lot of people, whenever the new Big 12 came about, a lot of people still believe that Houston, now given the same resources as Baylor, TCU, and Texas Tech, will dominate. Mostly they believe this because they're in the city of Houston, which I guess that's the way to think about it if you haven't looked at Miami for the past 15 years and realize that hasn't really helped them, or if you haven't looked at UCLA pre-Chip Kelly and realize that never helped them, or any of the Bay Area schools, right? It's just because you're in Houston, in the city, you still need good coaching. You still need good recruiting. Houston, speaking of recruiting, for 2024, Houston, I believe last I checked, was the worst team in the Big 12. And yes, they are still the worst team for 2024 in the Big 12, despite being in the city of Houston. So that kind of goes to show that recruits still like to win and be well coached.
You know, they brought in Donovan Smith, so I think that should pretty much show all of us how competitive they're going to be this year. Moving on, you guys play at Baylor. I think this one is close, and I have Baylor pulling this one out.
So it'll be interesting. So as of right now, we have Tech at 5-0, right?
Yes.
This game is in Waco, though I do think Texas Tech will be a better team this year than Baylor. In Waco, that's kind of tough. I got Texas Tech losing that game.
Well, obviously, great minds have thought alike so far. You guys play Kansas State at home. Could be a game that decides if you guys go to the conference championship game. I'm going with the Wildcats. Who are you going with?
Yeah, same. I think they're the best team in the conference. I think they have the best quarterback in the conference, and arguably the best defense in the conference. So, yeah, I got to go K-State. And funny enough with K-State is that Oklahoma, up until last year, Oklahoma had beaten us, I believe it was 9 years straight. And it was known that Oklahoma had beaten us 9 years straight. Everybody know. We all felt it. We felt the pain of losing Oklahoma. Every year, Texas Tech plays Kansas State. And every year, I think Tech fans feel like, they are a average team we can beat. Yet they've actually also beaten us, I think, 9 years straight. Like, they beat us every year. And it just never feels like they've beaten us every year. But every year it comes up and K-State just beats us. And maybe it's because every year we play K-State, we feel like we're in it and we almost won, or we should have won, or something happens there. But they've beaten us every single year. And I don't think that stops this year when they have a better team.
I call that grounding out against Greg Maddux syndrome. You always feel like the next time you face Greg Maddux, you're going to take him deep, right? I was a little bit out in front that time. I'll get him next time. And then the next time.
You are so right. Because everybody was scared of John Smoltz. Smoltz, everybody was like, oh my God. They're like, oh, thank God we got Maddux today. Like, he wasn't as good.
Because Maddux threw 87, 88, maybe 89 if he had an extra cup of coffee. And he always felt like you were right. Oh, I almost had him. But what you don't realize is he's toying with you. He's taking a little bit off. He puts a little more pressure on the ring figure this time. He's always messing with you. He's always making you feel like you can hit him because he wants you to swing. You never get dominated by Greg Maddux, but you don't hit him.
That's a great point. Yeah, actually, another one is Scherzer. Scherzer is another example of that. I remember during the national when the Nationals had it, everybody was scared of Strasburg, and Scherzer who had a steady career up to that point, wasn't dominant just yet, and it was like, oh well, okay, we got rid of Strasburg, we can get Scherzer, and Scherzer would go out and actually even had a better year than Strasburg. I will say what's funny about K-State, I already talked about how wrong I was with Neil Brown. I've only been wrong about two current Big 12 coaches. One was Neil Brown. One was Chris Kleiman. I actually didn't think that would work out. Though he had success at NDSU, I thought it was too big of a jump all the way to the Big 12. The previous coach, the Kleiman at NDSU, went to Wyoming. Right, that's usually the jump you see from FCS. You see to a Group of 5 school. I thought it was too big of a jump, and again, I was wrong. Everybody else, I've been pretty spot on with, but those two, big yikes.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I've been pretty much awful with every coaching hire across the board. The only ones I can say I liked was Aranda to Baylor and Leipold to Kansas. And I did like Kleiman to K-State, but I thought Venables was going to be great out the gate. I thought Sark was going to be great out the gate. I really believe they should have fired Kalani Sitake. And honestly, I low-key still believe that. I thought Matt Campbell was going to be a generational coach.
You can't for Iowa State. It can never sustain. It can't sustain. Like,
can't.
It's not possible. And I think that's a big reason why the rumor for him leaving was so strong last year, because he realized that, oh my God, it's here. It's like this thing that's waiting out in the water. Like, you can't sustain this level of success in football at Iowa State. It's unsustainable. And that's really the biggest problem, is that you are the number 2 school in a not talent rich state. And it's tough. The better recruits in Iowa usually go to Iowa. So you go down to Texas, and the problem is Texas kids would rather go to almost every school before they go to Iowa State. And you were hoping to sustain it a little bit longer, but it's just rough. And then this whole gambling thing, they're going to be the worst team in the conference. I didn't originally have them as the worst team in the conference, but now, and I don't even think Hunter Decker's that good, but he's something, right? And you lose him, you lose to a couple of your other two good players.
Addict. That's what he is.
Yes, that's right.
Well,
No,
and you add to it NIL. I mean, not that they don't have something going on there, but they can't compete with. I mean, I know you poo-pooed SMU, but their NIL collective is dunking all over Iowa State's NIL collective, my friend. In case you're wondering,
That's true.
So they got some issues there structurally. I like the way you put it. Like there's some you need to get out after you win your 10 wins is what you need to do.
That's what we try to do.
You need to do what Gene Chizik and Pat Dye and every other Iowa State coach that used Iowa State as a springboard is realize, oh yeah, I got to go.
Yeah, that's what he tried to do. And he at least he has some time. Kalani Sitake, he got 2 years. I think really him and Dana Holgerson, they kept on because he wanted to make this transition to the conference seamless. Both of them got 2 years. If they don't make something shake in 2 years, I think they're both out.
I think you are spot on. And I would like to add that I would have much rather had Matt Campbell follow in the steps of Dye and Chizik and go to Auburn than Auburn hire the scrub that is what is his name? Now, of course, they got what is
you're talking about
former Liberty head coach, former Ole Miss head Hugh Freeze. Yeah.
Oh, Hugh Freeze.
Yeah. Matt Campbell would have been a much better hire because at least there's not going to be a program killing scandal from the head coach. Like Campbell can't control if his players bet on games. That's a player decision. Campbell doesn't make calls to escort services using company phones. So just want to add that out there. And I completely agree with you on Sitake. I wonder if BYU students have to tithe a portion of their NIL earnings to the program. I wonder if that hurts. But you guys do play BYU. In our hypothetical scenario, we both have them at 5-2 right now on a 2-game losing streak at BYU. I think you guys will win in Provo. I think it's going to be very similar to the Arkansas BYU game from last year. BYU is going to dominate early, but Texas Tech will pull away late. What do you think?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I do think Tech's going to win on the road, but I'm not as confident as I should be, considering that I think Tech's a much better team than BYU. I think BYU is going to win a few games they have no business winning just because they're in Provo, right? And that Provo home field advantage is always going to be a home field advantage in this conference. So there's going to be a few games at home, namely home against Oklahoma. I think it's a good one. Home against Texas Tech, home against Cincinnati. I call that a BYU victory, to be honest, just because one, Cincinnati's not very good this year, but then also that distance of a travel. And so I think this will be a close game. It'll be closer than it should be. Tech will likely be favored, but if I was a betting man, if I was Hunter Deckers, I'd probably vote BYU with the points. But I do think Tech's going to win on a field goal.
That's fair and very accurate. The reason why BYU is so good at home is because their student section doesn't drink. And because of that, you have the stamina to cheer for the whole game. See, when I was at UNLV, I was out by halftime. Partly because we sucked. But another reason is because the inebriation is real. So that's something that needs to be studied when it comes to BYU's home fan base. You guys then following week plays TCU at home, defending, you can't even really say Fiesta Bowl champions is the best way to put it. I think you guys beat Texas Christian. What do you think?
So this is going to be tough. It's going to be a rough one. TCU, Texas Tech's always good games. It's funny. I will say this. I actually think Tech will, between BYU and TCU, we're going to lose one of those 2 games.
Okay.
So I had us winning BYU. That means I have us losing TCU. I have us losing one of those 2. I just don't really think we'll go on a 3-game losing streak. I think that's a lot of games to lose in a row. I do think TCU is going to be very good. I think teams, here's the thing about TCU. I know they lost a lot on offense. I get that. Sonny Dykes is still a very good coach. He's actually who I've wanted Sonny Dykes to be the head coach of Texas Tech for a long time, even when we hired Cliff Kingsbury and Sonny Dykes was at Cal. I wanted us to go out and get Sonny Dykes. So I'm a big fan of Sonny Dykes in general. But I think they're going to reload. Chandler Morris is actually the quarterback that Sonny Dykes wanted to start last year, right? And so meaning he's not a scrub. He's going to come in. He's going to be able to work that offense, the offense that Sonny Dykes actually wants to run anyway. And they're a versatile coaching staff. I think they're going to be just fine. Like I think all these. I actually have TCU as third in the conference. I think everybody kind of writing them off because they lost all this talent offensively, and they did lose a lot of talent offensively. But when you went 13-1 for 14 games up until the national championship game, that's something that you can't, though they almost lost a lot of games, you got to give it to the coaching staff. They knew how to pull it out at the end. And so I'm going to go ahead and say Tech loses this one, and that puts us at what, 5-3, 6-3?
6-3 at the moment.
Yep.
You guys play at Kansas the following week. I have you guys beating Kansas.
Yep.
Yeah. So now we're at 7-3. Senior night, UCF. I think you guys pull it out 34-31. What do you think?
Just as close as you said. I think it's going to be like, again, I believe in UCF. I think they're going to be out of the freshman four, the most dangerous program, not just this year, this upcoming year, but going forward, because they didn't get a new head coach like Cincinnati did. They didn't keep their lame duck head coach like Houston did, or like BYU did, actually, both of them. And so with that, I think UCF's best position. They've already recruited like it, and I think next year is going to be a good year for them. I believe I have them 5th, actually, as far as my rankings go. But I do think Tech wins this because we're at home. I think if it was in Orlando, it would probably be a flip of the script. The 34-31 sounds great, and that puts us at 7-3 before going and playing Texas.
Yes,
Ooh.
And I have the Longhorns, unfortunately, pulling out that game 41-31. It's hard to see Texas losing on senior night. That's not something they traditionally do because last year they beat.
Or 8-3.
They beat some. I know they beat someone on senior night. And then the year before that was Iowa State, I think, on senior night. Because I wasn't the Kansas game. I don't know. Whatever it was, I think they pull it out. I just don't see Texas Tech going down to this Texas team, which I think is going to be desperate at this point in the season. Because I think this game will decide. I don't think they'll be in the national title picture, but I do think that this game could decide whether they go to the Big 12 championship game. But more importantly, I think this game could decide if they go to a New Year's Six bowl game. So I think they're going to play hard, and I think that that's going to be the difference. They're going to be at home, senior night, and also, offensively, they got speedsters all over the field.
Yeah, this is going to be a good game. And what's funny about this game? So a little bit about the Texas Tech rivalry. Texas Tech, for the longest time, we've known that we're like Tech. We dislike Texas. We've known that. And actually, if anything, it's ramped up since A&M's left the conference. When I was in school, A&M was our biggest rival, in my opinion. Like they were the school that they were a complete antithesis to Texas Tech. Everything that all the weird stuff Texas A&M did, we found disgusting, and all like the partying that we did, A&M found disgusting. Like we were complete opposites of the two. That was a really good rivalry, and it was a rivalry that was competitive. Like we win not most of them, but we won a decent amount of times. A&M won the most decent amount of times. But if we're being honest, Texas usually wins this rivalry. Right, very much, and I don't have a problem saying. And I think everybody always talks about the whole big brother, little brother thing as a diss. I don't really like. Yeah, in this scenario, we're the little brother to Texas, and we actually proved it back in 2010 when we refused to leave the conference because we were waiting on what Texas was wanting to do. So it is what it is in that aspect, right? But I will say, the past 2 years, the Texas fans that for the longest time have said, "Oh, we don't care nothing about Texas Tech," has been lying to our faces. Because when Chris Beard left for Texas in basketball, that showed the vitriol the Tech fans had brought out the vitriol the Texas fans have. And then Texas Tech did a dastardly thing and actually won the football game last year. And it has been that much. And then not only that, Quinn Ewers, Texas Tech and Texas were the two schools that he was going up against. He was deciding between. And a receiver that name escapes me. I know Tech fans are going to listen to this and say, how the hell could you forget the 5-star receiver that we currently have that's likely to commit to Texas Tech? But he's also choosing between Texas Tech and Texas. So like that, we have been at each other's throats more than usual the past 2 years. And so what's going to happen is in this scenario where Texas Tech and Texas are potentially fighting out. Right now I have Texas Tech at 8-3. Texas will likely be about the same, 8-3, 9-2 at the time. Winner of that game probably is going to be set up to go to the Big 12 championship game. And, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in that. Especially at this point, if we are the record we are, that means that Tyler Shuck has been healthy, or Baron Morton, and our quarterback's been performing well. It means that Quinn Ewers has been performing well as well, and they have really good skill positions. But funny enough, their weakness, I would argue, right now is just an inexperienced O-line, right? And so, but if they're 9-2 at that point, that means that O-line is much more experienced than I give them credit for. And so, to answer the question of who wins this game, I did a lot of talking, but to answer the question of who wins this game, Texas at home in Austin. Again, if this was in Lubbock, I would have a different opinion. Though I think this is the quietest 100,000 seat stadium in the country, it won't be full of red and black. It'll be a lot of burnt orange. And I think it'll be a close game. But unfortunately, Texas, I do think Texas is going to win the game. I will say, though, right before you go, Bill, if Texas Tech wins this game, remember what I told you about how I feel about Oklahoma? If Texas Tech wins this game, my sisters, my sister's boyfriend, my neighbor back home, my uncle, right? A bunch of my friends will never hear the end of it from me. Right, I ever like they will. I don't care what they do in the SEC. They can win a damn national championship, and I will say, and that's not going to happen. But I will say, last time y'all played Texas Tech, y'all lost, so we got bragging rights on you forever. And so especially if it's to go to the Big 12 championship game. Oh God, they will. Oh my God, they'll never hear it from me.
Tell people where they can find your work, Albie, where they can follow you, what's coming up next on your podcast, all the stuff you're up to.
Yeah, so on Twitter at Mr_Albie Shore, ALBIESHORE. You can find me on Twitter, on Threads. That's a thing, and so you can find me there as well. Also at Tortillas N Takes, so Tortillas, the letter N Takes on Twitter. On Instagram, we're Tortillas and Takes. There's too many characters for Twitter. But yeah, and then our podcast, anywhere that you find podcasts, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your podcast from, Tortillas and Takes podcast, also the 1012 Network podcast. I'm on there occasionally as well. We cover all things Big 12. Of course, Tortillas and Takes, we cover Texas Tech primarily, but we dip in the Big 12 stuff. Right now for Tortillas and Takes, we are doing our season preview. So we're bringing all of our friends and talking to them about their teams and talking about the games they're going to be playing against Texas Tech. Kind of going through that. We only have a couple weeks before football season starts, before Texas Tech plays Wyoming, who Texas Tech will win that Wyoming game. But Wyoming ain't too shabby. I will say Wyoming's going to come out and they're going to play, and it's going to be in the middle of nowhere and all that other stuff. So we'll see. But yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Well, thank you once
to all
again.
the people of Laramie, Wyoming that are watching. He didn't mean that.
No, y'all listen. Love is in the middle of nowhere. Laramie's very in the middle of nowhere. You know what I'm saying? So like, so if anything, we relate, but like, we don't relate that much. Yeah.
Well, it has been a pleasure. We will have to bring you back before the Texas game. We'll have to have you back before the Texas game and talk about that. Once again, a pleasure, an honor, a privilege. We didn't mean to have you on this long, but you were so good at good stuff that we just couldn't stop. So we will definitely look forward to having you again. You are ooching your way up in the friends of the show, the FOS rankings. So, I mean, obviously, Jake, Mr. Keatley, Josh Keatley, you don't have to worry, you're still number one. But keep looking at Albie in your rearview mirror. On behalf of Team MBS Sports, on behalf of the Babyface Assassin, my co-host, Brock Vieira, I do want to thank you once again, Albie, for joining us. It has been a pleasure and honor, privilege. We'll talk to you again very soon.
I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, sir. Well, Brock, that went long, but well. Went long, but well. And I guess we learned some things, and you once again managed to offend some fan bases, which is kind of your thing.
Good. I'm sorry. Some fan bases need to be offended for as much trash as they talk periodically throughout the year.
Sure. I once again, I may not be with you, but you are, as you said, you're not always, you're often right. You're maybe alone, but you're often right. I will begin working. I think I'm going to try to get Brian McLaughlin on to talk about the rest of the Power 5 conferences, and then we'll finish up with the SEC the week after that, and then there'll be games.
Yes, we're looking very forward to those games. You know, we're going to keep covering it here. For everyone watching Team MBS Media, please subscribe. And also, we have 2 new football shows coming out, College Football Review Show and also NFL Review Show. Check us out here at Team MBS Media. Both Bill Carroll and I have tremendous amounts of articles on there so you guys can enjoy. And it's just a great place to get great content.
Yeah, so once again, a pleasure, honor, privilege. Check back with